Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and this is the second time I'm recording this video about multiple visual performance in Power BI. And the reason for that is that I managed to mute my microphone. And if there's one complaint I have about this Fifine microphone, it's they like hide the mute, that the indicator that you're on mute or not. And it's like one thing on a microphone that you'd really want is to like be able to know, is the damn thing muted or not. But my one complaint, the other overall, I think the sound quality has improved greatly since I got it. It's good value and all of that. Okay, with that out of the way, we're continuing on with this performance analyzer stuff. I'm really starting to dig into the weeds on this stuff. And this is the document that was out there along with that horrible report that Will Thompson or whoever put together, and I had to go fix right in order to get this all working. So this is talking about multiple visuals on a page and what happens when that is the case. And the important pieces to understand out of this is number one is that the front end is a single threaded UI. Okay. So a UI, yeah, single threaded, the UI layer when it's actually displaying the visuals in that is single threaded. That's a single threaded process versus the backend layer, which this would be your analysis services piece, right? Which can do multiple queries running at the same time in parallel, right? So this is multi-threaded. Now you might think that I would ding Microsoft for putting in a single-threaded UI, but I do not because multi-threading is very, very difficult in terms of from a development perspective, and especially I can imagine that you have multiple different visuals on a page, like 30 or 40 visuals. If they're all in their own thread, they would be a nightmare to try to coordinate that. And like, especially the fact that this one could impact this visual and vice versa and all that other stuff. I think it'd be a nightmare. And so I perfectly understand why it is a single threaded process, but it is a single threaded process. And so what you have is you have this visual one, right? It goes out and prepares the query. The query happens, it reads the result, and then it displays the visual, right? And so while that is going on for visual one, visual two and three are queued. Okay, so visual three, now it runs and it's queued, and the visual three, right? And then it displays right over here. Okay, so at the same time, visual two is queued. So after visual three renders, then visual two renders, right? So it's like a traffic jam, all trying to get 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 the get the results, and then get the visual displayed, right? So that's the first thing that's important. The second thing that's important is that basically this render result, this display is the render or the visual. That is when in performance analyzer, this query part is the query. It shows up as the query. This part shows up as the visual, and then everything else is other. Okay, that shows up right there. Everything else is other, more or less. All this queuing that's going on. So this is how you can tell. The other part is how you can tell how backed up your visuals are getting, more or less, is how you can think of that. Okay, so let's get into. Let's find this report right here. Okay, so what's going on here, Greg? Right. So here's what I did to tackle this. I wanted to see like here's one visual, and then here's two visuals, here's three visuals, here's four visuals, and I went all the way up to 10 with this. And so right now, I was testing out the same card visual, pasted on this 10 times. And the way I'd run these is so initially what I'd do is I would take one card visual and I would use population. I'm pretty sure it's the one I would always go with by default. I'd clear this off. This would be on the page. And then I hit refresh 10 times. And I'd export that. Okay. And then I would take, another single visual, which would be like life satisfaction. And it would be the only visual on the page, as a card or a table. And then I would clear everything off and I would run that 10 times. And I did that for each of the individual visuals. There's 6 of them: population, life satisfaction, energy, and then renewable energy, culture activity, the change in population, the change in life satisfaction. Those are the 6 metrics that I was using. And so at one point I had all 6 of those on this page, and I'd run the 10 tests and export it. And then I started copying the visuals so that I got all the way up to 10. I copied the population, the life satisfaction, the energy, and the culture activity. Right. So, that's what I've been doing with my life, sad as that is. And I was also did that for this table visual over here, did the same thing where I changed the metric, and I, you know, individually timed each one of them, and then I'd time 2 together, and then 3 together, and then 4, then 5, and 6, right? And I always did it in the same way. It was population, again, life satisfaction, um, energy, cultural activity, life satis either population change or life satisfaction change, and the other one was like, vice versa. However, anyway, so that's what I've been doing, and then I would go into that's how I collected the data, and then it's Teams. You saw those DAX for Human videos. I'm queuing those up too. I'm going to be recording those. Okay, then we get to this mess. All right. Actually, no, it made Will Thompson's report even worse potentially, which I didn't think it'd be possible. But all right, so what I did, so card is the card visuals, right? Table is the table visuals, and then card two that's all the same card visual, right? 1 to 10. So as you can see with table, here is one table visual population. I ran it 10 times. And then this is one table, the energy, right? Energy, renewable energy percent. And I ran that 10 times. And same thing with culture activity and same thing with life satisfaction and population change and life satisfaction change, right? So these are all of the individual timings for just one visual. And you can see it's like 410, 416. It's all in the 400 range. Then you get to 2 tables. In this case, the 2 tables would have been population and culture and life satisfaction, right? You have those 2 tables, and that's this number, 1286. And I did that with 3 tables, 4 tables, 5 tables, 6 tables, 7, 8, 9, right? Get all the way up to like 16,000 milliseconds, right? But remember, like for an individual run, right? You gotta divide that number by 10. So it's not really taking 16 seconds to display on the page. It's taking more like 1.6 seconds per refresh to display on the page. Okay, that's why I did 10, was to make the math easy. I'm all about the easy math. All right. So now what I did was I then, and I should say this, when table is selected, anything that says table is what you should pay attention to. Don't pay attention to the card stuff. Don't pay attention to the card stuff. Again, it's for my own personal use, so don't judge me. I know how this thing works and what the calculations are. So what I did was I said, okay, what is the average of these single table displays? And that's what this number is, 443. So then it is, then you say, okay, so perhaps expected behavior is that if I put 2 visuals on a page, and then it should return in 886 milliseconds, right? Because it's just 2 times the average of the display, right? But that's not what you get. There's a penalty for having 2 visuals on a page, and the penalty, right? So it actually takes 1,286 milliseconds, right? Or 1.2 milliseconds, or whatever, 1.2 seconds when you're displaying this stuff per run, right? And so that's what this table is doing. So basically, there's a 1.5, almost a 1.5 times penalty just for having 2 visuals on the page. Okay, so on the individually, that would run in 886 milliseconds. It runs in 1,286 milliseconds. So that's basically 1.5. That's the difference between this and this, right? If you multiply this number by 1.45, you get this number. Okay, that's how it works. That's what this table multiplier is. And you can see it keeps growing and growing and growing and growing and growing over time. So it gets up to a whopping 3.7, basically 3.7 times what you would expect that to get if you just displayed those tables individually on a page and timed them all, right? So that's pretty significant. And you can see here that this is the difference between, that's 0.1 is the difference between 1.55 and 1.45, right? 2.6, that's the difference between 1.55 and 1.80. Some rounding going on here, people. So anyway, and you see this big jump around the table right here around 6 visuals. I'm like, I wonder if that's actually significant, because that really changes the slope of the line, really, kind of, and that sort of thing. So I was like, so I replicated the exact same thing with the card visual. The card visual, now something that's interesting to me, maybe it's not to everybody, but the DAX square, the table visual, you get about 3,000 milliseconds across the 10 runs, across all these runs. So that's 10 times how many these are, right? It's a lot of runs, and even across all those runs and everything else, right? 2% is in the analysis services, less than 2%. So why are there 800-page books written on optimizing 2% of what's going on versus optimizing 98% of what's going on. But anyway, that's what led me down this rabbit hole to begin with. So the table visual, you have queuing is about 26,000 milliseconds. DAX queries 3,000, and the visual is the largest piece. It's 40,000. So the largest piece of the time for the table visuals is really just displaying the table visuals. It's not the things are queued here, but it actually is actually rendering it, which is causing the most amount of time to be consumed. With the card visual, that's not the case. One, the DAX query is much less, right? It's about 1,000 milliseconds less, and that's to be expected, right? You're coming back with a in the table visual, coming back with a population, let's say per country, versus on a card visual, it's just here's the population. Does that make sense? Now the visual is really low at 4,000 milliseconds compared to 40,000. So it's an order of magnitude difference. Okay. And then the other though is it's basically the same. You're getting 26,000 milliseconds here of queuing. And with the card, you're getting about 24,000 milliseconds of queuing. So from that perspective, it's about the same amount of wait time going on within the UI, but the table visual is just super expensive compared to the card visual in terms of actually rendering it, like by an order of magnitude. So that's what's going on here. All right, so get that out of the way. So the card visual. So now the card visual, again, I have all my individual card times. Then I get 2 cards, 3 cards, 4 cards. Same math going on as with the table. And then here's my average for my display cards. And so you'd expected value for 2 would be 566, but it's really 776, which then gives us, again, remember, ignore this, card multiplier and card difference. It's about a 1.37. But again, now the interesting thing is with the table visual, right? We got all the way up, it always increased, and we got all the way up to 3.7 as the penalty, right? But with the card visual, we only get up to about 2.26, right around and it kind of hovers around that 2 range versus what you would expect, in terms of rendering 6 card visuals separately on separate pages versus 6 card visuals on the same page. It's a multiplier of 2.1, right? That's your penalty for having that many card visuals on a page. So let's see. And the other thing is that like it actually goes down sometimes compared to what would be expected, right? You can see that reflected in these numbers, but you still have between 5 and 6, you have that jump, right? That same kind of bend. And I'm like, okay, is there something about 6 visuals that really, is this real? Right? I mean, yes, I can see that it's real, but does it have any real meaning behind it? Like, is 6 visuals like, oh, that's the limit, and then things start getting crazy, and we have to do a bunch of other optimization stuff, but is it real? So that's why I ran, because the other factor in this would be, well, maybe the last 2 visuals that I added on there are really expensive, comparatively, and so therefore, that's why you get this knee here. So in order to test that, came up with card 2. So card 2 is all the same visual. As you can see, it gets rid of that knee. So more than likely it's not, but you do get this little knee around 8 to 9 visuals. So I don't know if that's significant or not. Have to do more investigation. But then it kind of like it's a one-time thing, and then it returns back to kind of like the same slope as what's going on down here. So I don't think that it's but interesting to see how that scales out potentially, over time. And again, now with the card 2, with the same card visual, right? It's very smart around the DAX. It looks like it knows that, oh, all these cards want the same info, and so I just got to run, once and feed it to all the cards, right? Is what it looks like is going on here, because this is 400 milliseconds over the course of those runs versus like 5-6 times that. So that was interesting. Again, the visual rendering time stayed the same basically, and the other basically stayed the same. Maybe a little less queuing going on, because probably the DAX query is coming back faster, right? So that all makes very much sense to me. And again, with the single card visual, your penalty is way less, or not way less, but it's less. It's less than when you have different card, different metrics in the card. Right? These all tend to be a little bit lower, but it's roughly the same, and it roughly hovers around 2. It gets up to 2, it kind of like almost like kind of slopes out is what it looks like to me. It kind of like, oh, and then it kind of maybe that's what this stuff is supposed to be, card multiplier by number of visuals, right? This is what is kind of trying to show that more or less. But all right, what else do I want to say here? I think that covers just about everything, except that, like, you guys tell me, is 10 enough? Like, would you ever have more than 10 table visuals on a page that you'd have to know what the factor is, what the penalty you're paying for that is? Um, but I plan on doing this for individual visuals, like, maybe not all of them. Like, I'll maybe do like the column chart and then a matrix and an area chart and the tree map and a couple other, pie chart. Always got to do the pie chart. But pick a different, pick some select, definitely a map visual, but pick them out and run through the exact same test I've done here, where I'm, putting 1 to 10 visuals on a page, do the same testing and come back and report the results. So that's one thing I want to do. The table visual itself, I had actually started this first before I did this video, but Dennis Priester had some questions about multiple visuals on a page. And I really wanted to dig into it, so that's why I did this video first. I've got most of the data collected for the table visual, and that video is going to explore, hey, does adding conditional formatting, cause performance, bottlenecks or performance issues? And does spark lines cause performance, problems? Or does making the table bigger horizontally or vertically, does that cause any performance kind of issues or differences, I guess you could say? So that's gonna be that video, and I might do that same kind of video for some of the other individual visuals, and then I'm gonna try to tackle where I'm gonna create my report. I might like actually do back to Life in Europe report, if I can bring it up, where I go back and I actually take now this would be basically just card visuals, but look, I've got all these little images and things like that. So it'd be interesting to see how this kind of, and there's a bunch of different measures and different stuff, a little card, that's a card, card, right? There's a bunch of stuff going on with this. So it'd be interesting to compare different ways of creating this page. And in one, like one, okay, I'm going to add one visual and that's it, and time it and export it, and then 2, and then 3, and then build this page up one visual and one element at a time, right? And compare what's going on at each stage, right? I think that would be an interesting kind of thing to do. And then experiment with different ways of creating this page. Like, what if I hadn't, like, I used a measure with a text measure and then dropped it onto a card visual? What if I just used a text box, right? Because the measure in the card has the ability to potentially be dynamic. I didn't make it dynamic, but it had the potential to be dynamic, and I didn't know where I was going with the report originally, so that's how I did it, as kind of a future-proof thing. But it could be costing me performance, right? So I think that would be interesting things to get into as far as how to build this page. Again, bookmarks, I think hidden visuals and bookmarks, proving out whether or not they do or do not impact performance. I'm hoping you don't, right? I would expect them not to, but you don't know. This is science, right? So you have to be very careful, and you can only about drawing inferences or making assumptions, right? You got to prove it when it comes down to science. So that's how I view this as far as going in and digging into this stuff. So, well, you guys tell me, is 1 to 10, is that enough? Do these sound like interesting videos or interesting things to know about? Are you enjoying the whole performance analyzer thing? Because I tend to get into these things and go down a rabbit hole and just go crazy with this stuff. You guys know that. I mean, the whole Winters thing and all of that other stuff. I mean, I'll just do it because I can. Right. So anyway, very interesting stuff in terms of back to this report. Some of the most interesting stuff, I think, is this table multiplier, growing so fast compared to the card multiplier over here. Does not grow nearly as fast. I think that's interesting. This performance penalty in general of the multiplier, right? I think that is interesting stuff. So yeah, I mean, I'll probably publish out some more like one pagers or things like that. I don't know. We'll have to see. But I'm really kind of enjoying going down this, and I think there's just a ton of potential, just different avenues to explore with this thing. So there you have it. That's all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.